Today, this first time together, I'm not really going to call it a message. It's more of a lecture in this case because I wanted to do something a little different. We're not really specifically basing this first one completely off of God's Word, although God's Word is going to be woven throughout it and is the foundation. Hebrews chapter 11:3 is where the message loosely came from. But to this one, I'm going to be a little bit more philosophical, but I don't think it's going to be too hard to understand, and I think it's going to help us understand and have a good foundation for where we're going the rest of this time. The next message is going to have a lot of scripture in it, and we'll be able to enjoy that, and so I'm looking forward to that one even more than this one. But I wanted to start this weekend with our two main themes are going to be faith and framework. We're going to begin by looking at framework, or also known as worldview. I think one of the greatest burdens that I've developed over the last 9 years of ministry has been to help people understand the foundation on which they're building their lives. It's been very important because there's a lot of Christians who boldly proclaim, I'm a Christian. And yet, when you ask them what their worldview is, you ask them what their story of reality is, they don't really seem to know. But this is far more than just a Christian problem. I've been trying to interact with a lot of my neighbors and trying to find out where they're coming from. And it's very interesting to note most of them cannot give any kind of clear understanding of how they view the world, any clear words to what goes on in their decision-making processes and what goes on in how they view life. They don't even know. And I've been wondering about that for some time, and I began to study the idea of how we get our truth, how a person comes to know something at all. And it's been a really helpful study, and I hope today it'll be helpful for you. Are you disturbed by the world today? You look at what's going on, you have groups of people shouting at each other and never coming to any kind of understanding. You look at what's happening in Portland, Seattle, places like that with riots going on in the street, and we're like, what is happening? What's going on? Does this make any sense? People are yelling, people are upset, and then you have all of these protests and riots. You have kneeling during the national anthem in football games and other sports games. You have all of this to protest a problem that a lot of people don't even think exists, or at least they won't acknowledge that it exists. There's this deep moral divide on questions that really do matter. Questions like, is gender a biological reality or a social construct? Whether a child that's not born yet is a life or just a fetus. Whether we should all acknowledge, even allow people who are here illegally to stay, or if we should be hard and kick them out. These types of questions have lots of moral connotation that people are yelling about, and yet there's a lot of division. And very few people are trying to understand each other. Very few people are trying to have any kind of rational discussion. What you see is that emotion rules the day, and so people are shouting at each other. People are vilifying each other. They're calling each other names. They're committing acts of violence against each other, and there's no willingness to try to engage, no willingness to try to figure out what's happening. And nearly everyone that I know from either side hates what's going on. Everybody says, this is not how we want the world to be, and yet we continue to do it. You continue to see people who have no control of themselves in stopping what's happening. And what often gets lost in the discussion, I think, is the framework from which these views come from. Everybody has a framework. Everyone has an underlying worldview that kind of determines how you process life. And yet the reality is most people can't put words to what that worldview is. Most people don't know how they are processing information. They don't even understand. And I've become convinced over time that if we as Christians will take time to really understand, first of all, our framework, and then take another step and try to understand the framework from which people around us are coming at life through, it's going to make us more bold and useful representatives for Jesus. Now, what I did not say there is that it's going to solve all of these problems. It will not. In fact, in some cases, it's going to intensify the problems. And I readily acknowledge that. I do believe, however, that if we take a step back and we examine what we believe, and then contrast it to what somebody else believes, we're going to have potential to be more bold and caring and compassionate towards those that we interact with. It may make you more like Jesus, I hope, to think about this as you look around and you see people and have this view of them that they're harassed and helpless like people without a shepherd, like sheep without a shepherd. And it may be that able to help you not to be so angry at people around you, but to be angry at the God of this world who has blinded the minds of the unbelievers. We need help here. And what we want to see is that we have the opportunity to share truth, to make the light of the glory of the gospel of Christ, of God in the face of Jesus Christ, shine brightly in a dark world that needs it. And so this first message is, like I said, more philosophical in nature. I would call it more of a lecture than a message. The next three messages will be exploring Bible passages specifically. But here we're going to look at the three basic branch of psychology called epistemology, the study of how people come to know. That's what that means, simply. It's how people come to know things. And I want to just look at the three main ways that we have discovered that people process life, process information, and through these there are tons of branches and splinters and different ways within each of these three main worldviews. But these three kind of summarize everything, summarize how people approach life. I'm sure very soon we'll have a fourth one. They're always changing, but these are the three main ones right now. So this is not going to be as deep as it sounds. We're going to be looking at pre-modernism, modernism, and postmodernism. And you may hear that and say, okay, it's time to turn my brain off and go to sleep. I don't want to deal with all this early in the morning. All right, I hope you'll stick with me because I don't think I'm going to make it that complicated. One of the things God has gifted me with is the fact that I am not that smart. And as someone that's not that smart, I'm not able to overshoot people too much because I really can't get deeper than I am going today. So here we go. We're going to look at the branch of epistemology. We're going to look at the ways people come to know. And I'm going to start by talking about it like it's a book. I want to use this illustration of a book. I want you to pretend that someone hands you a book. We'll say Helen hands you a book. And she says, all right, I want you to read this book. I want you to give me your thoughts and critique of the book's message and that the author is trying to communicate to us. And then I want you to tell me what you think we should do with that message. So you take the book, you sit down, you start to read it. And as you do, you're going at it with some presuppositions, some thoughts that Helen has put into your mind that are true. And the first of those is that there is a book. You have a book in your hands. The second is there's an author of that book. Somebody wrote it. The third thing you're thinking as you approach this book is that the author was trying to communicate something by writing this book. The fourth thing is that by using normal human comprehension, language comprehension skills, you'll be able to discern what the author is trying to communicate, and then there should be a response to that message. So as you set off to understand this book, your friend Frank comes along and asks you what you're doing. And you say, well, I'm reading this book that Helen gave me, and I'm going to give her my insight on what the author is trying to communicate and what we should do with this message. To which Frank responds, Helen is crazy. There is no author to that book. What you are reading there is a random collection of sentences that just sort of came together. However, she is right that if you use your normal, rational human comprehension skills, language comprehension skills, you should be able to determine the message of that random book, and there should be some response to it. So you start to read with Frank's view in mind, and you're getting a little bit confused. How can I possibly know there's a message in this book if there's no author? How can I know what I'm supposed to do with this? And can I trust a random collection of sentences that just came together? And so as you're getting a little bit more confused, your friend Taylor comes along and approaches you and asks what you're doing. You tell Taylor, well, I'm reading this book that Helen gave me, but then Frank came along and told me that there's no author to this book. And so I'm trying to figure out with my logic and reasoning how to interpret the words of this book that doesn't have an author. And then Taylor responds that Frank and Helen are both crazy. Frank's right. There's no author. But if there's no author to that book, there's no message. And if there's no message and no author, I mean, you really can't even be sure that what you're holding in your hand is a book. But you are welcome to believe that that's a book if you want to, and you're welcome to read it if you want to, and you're welcome to decide that whatever it says has value if you want to. The biggest and most important thing that you come away with as you read that particular book is whatever you feel about it, whatever it makes you think, go with it. And by this point, you get really frustrated because you are totally confused, your head hurts, and you have no hope of finding any meaning in a book that you're not even sure exists. What I've just described to you with the example of a book are the three most common ways that people try to make sense of life. The book is the story, in the story is the world and life in it. Trying to make sense of this world that we live in, trying to make sense of the lives that we live within this world, we're treating life as a book. Everyone is searching for meaning, but your underlying assumptions about the world make a difference in whether and how you interpret the world and how you find meaning in this world. Helen thinks the ultimate meaning in this book is in the mind of the author. That there is an author out there, and that's where ultimate truth is found. And you can understand what the author intended because the author has created you and given you the tools by which you can understand the world and given you what you need to understand the world. So to summarize pre-modernism, Helen's view, truth is up there, in the mind of the author. That's where ultimate truth is. The next person, Frank, believes in what is called modernism, and he thinks that the meaning is completely found in the book itself, out in the world. That the way you determine life is by examining the world, doing experiments, rational processes. That truth is out there, out in the world, and it's meant to be discovered by us. The final person, Taylor, is the postmodernist. She rejects that there is any meaning at all except for the truth that she chooses for herself, that she chooses to believe. And so for Taylor, the ultimate truth is in here. I determine truth for me. Okay, these are the three main things, so which one is right? Well, I hope that as you read this, you understand, as Christians, you must believe that Helen is right. That the way to find truth in this world, meaning in this world, is to find the truth that the author of the world intended you to find. That the author has communicated why you were here and what you're supposed to be doing while you're here. And so we could describe it in the words of Hebrews 11, verse 3. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the Word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. You see, true understanding of this world starts with faith. That's where it begins, that there is an author. We believe that God intentionally created the world. We believe that He intentionally created people for a purpose, and He's told us what that purpose is. And then as people, He created us, and He tells us what He expects of us. He tells us what we need to be doing while we are here on this earth with the time He has given us, with the life He has given to us. And since He's the powerful creator, we believe He has the right to do whatever He wants with what He's made. He has the right to instruct us because He made us. Now I want to examine the three things quickly that make up pre-modern belief. And again, I want to quickly note that Christianity is not the only form of pre-modern belief. Any religion, basically, is probably a pre-modern belief because we believe, any religion will believe that truth is coming from an outside source, that somebody knows the truth and gave us information as to how to react in the world. So Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, all of these would have some form of pre-modern belief in them. But quickly going through pre-modern beliefs, what do we believe? Well, first of all, we believe there is an orderly physical reality. If you're a pre-modernist, you believe there's an orderly physical reality. There is some order in the world and that it makes sense. It's real. It's orderly. We can study the universe and we can understand it. We believe that there are laws that exist, they've been established, and they're going to be just as true tomorrow as they are today. We understand this. The sun is going to rise in the east and set in the west tomorrow, just like it did today. At least at sea level, water is going to boil at 212 degrees Fahrenheit and freeze at 32 degrees, just like tomorrow, just like it did today. Okay, we know this. And then when I talk to engineers at Boeing, they're telling me about the process of making a plane. And one of the men I was talking to, his main role is wings for the plane. And one of the things that they always do is they know how much load each metal can handle. And they trust that. They don't redo the experiment every time to make sure that this metal can still hold this much load tomorrow. They know if I use this metal, it will hold this much load. That's always going to be true. Why is that? Well, we have confidence that things like this are going to be the same tomorrow as they are today because we know there is an orderly author who designed things that way. That God made the world in a certain way. And there's an orderly physical reality. We believe that. The second thing we believe is that there is an orderly moral reality. Orderly moral reality. In other words, God has given us truth that is right, it's real, it's true. And the morality, these things are going to be just as true tomorrow as they are today. Things like justice and courage and humility are just as real to us as believers as rocks and trees and stars. These laws that God has given, these moral realities, the moral laws are just as reliable to us as the laws of thermodynamics and gravity. It's possible then to determine right from wrong. We know that. We know there is right. We know there is wrong because we recognize that God is a moral being and He gives us what is right. He gives us what is true. And if we decide not to order our lives under what God says is true, there are going to be consequences. We get that. We understand that. We have a reason for believing that because we believe there is an author who has told us why we're here. So in essence, we can say as pre-modernists, we believe that there are two books. There's the book of nature, and that tells us something about God, the orderly physical reality, and by studying that, we learn about God. But more specifically, we believe there is a place where God has revealed who He is and what He expects in the Bible, and we can read that and we can know about God. We know that God is real and He has told us who He is and what He expects. The third thing that we believe is that there's an orderly transcendent reality. That really what we are looking at in this world is a copy, it's a shadow of the greater reality. What is seen was made out of things that can't be seen. God's powerful words spoke the world into existence, and the things that we see are patterned after these invisible realities. The author of Hebrews absolutely loves this kind of teaching. He talks about the tabernacle, how it was patterned after the real heavenly tabernacle. He talks about the veil of the temple being patterned after Jesus' own flesh. He talks about how the old covenant was a shadow of the new covenant. There's a real sense in which the unseen is actually more true, more real than what we see, than what we actually experience on this world. And so all Christians are pre-modern in their thinking. There are some who try to combine postmodern thought with Christianity. Some have tried to combine modernism with Christianity, and it's always a failure. It turns out to be not Christianity at all. But you have to start with this view. If you are a Christian, you must be a pre-modern thinker. You must believe that truth is up there in the mind of the author, and it has been revealed to you. That is foundational. One theologian, Kevin Bowder, says this: for pre-moderns, and especially for the Christians, the way to know the world was not mainly to look at the world itself, because that's secondary reality. The way to know the world is to look at the primary reality after which the world has been copied. That primary reality exists in the mind of God. The best way of knowing and understanding the world is to know and love God. Of course, no one believes that Revelation will provide every detail about the world. We don't believe God has said, here's everything you need to know about the world. What we do believe is that everything we learn fits into the grid that God has given to us to filter everything through. That's pre-modern thought. So we come to recognize the truth is from outside, it's from above. God has given it to us. And so we actually put faith above knowledge. And in fact, we believe that true faith is necessary for knowledge. To know anything, it has to start with belief. It has to start with the idea that there is an author who has communicated who he is and what he expects. And that's how we come to know things. That's what gives life meaning. Now, we're going to spend the least amount of time on the second of these, called modernism, because it's almost extinct today. It hardly exists. You will find a few people, but for the most part, modernism is out of fashion, which is kind of weird when you call the name modernism, but we're past it. We've grown through it. But I just want to talk about it quickly. Pre-modern and postmodern are ruling the day today, but modernism, where pre-modern emphasizes faith, modernism emphasized doubt. It comes and says, okay, what we have are a whole bunch of objective and neutral facts, data. If we analyze these and collect as many facts as possible, analyze it as much as possible, then what we're going to find is truth emerges from that. So modernism's fundamental tenet is basically this: there is no God. There is no author. The world is here by random chance. However, we're still very optimistic about humanity. People are basically good, and because we're so good, if we work together and we work hard, we can do amazing things together. And so human reasoning is the only thing that can truly be trusted. We can trust ourselves. We'll throw out belief in the supernatural. We'll throw out belief in miracles. The modernist then believes that you don't need God at all. And if some modernists decide they do want to believe in a God, they believe he's inactive. He wound up the world and let it go, basically. We don't have much time to look at this view, but I want you to understand that over the last several hundred years, people have started to figure a few things out. The first is this, that a universe without a transcendent being makes as much sense as a book without an author. That has become very clear. Without God, the world doesn't make sense. If everything is random, how can we trust the laws of nature to be what they are? You ask an atheist like Richard Dawkins, Stephen Hawking, someone like that, why is the world the way it is? Why can we trust the laws of nature? What they're going to tell you is something like this: because that's what's needed for life to exist. It's just that way. We don't know why it's that way. It's just that way. Don't question it. They don't have any good explanation for this, but they recognize that it's true. Another thing you lose if you don't have an author is how can you say there is right and wrong if you don't have any kind of standard to judge by? How can a person ever achieve, though, and here's the biggest problem with modernism, how can a person ever achieve complete objectivity? How can you ever be completely neutral? Every fact that comes in, you have to analyze. You have to decide how it fits in, and you have to give more weight to certain facts than to other facts. In fact, that's why we have so many disagreements politically. One group weighs this set of facts much more than this set of facts. They ignore this completely and act like this is the only thing in reality. You have to weigh facts somehow. You have to put them into some sort of orderly system. And you cannot achieve that objectivity that modernism says is so important. And then how can you even prove that everything should be able to be proved? How can you even prove that your rationality can be trusted if it's random? The reality is there is no way. You lose your entire basis for knowledge if you don't have a transcendent being. And so that brings us to postmodernism, where we're going to spend most of our time. Postmodernism recognized the inconsistency of modernism. It's like, you know what? This doesn't make sense. If you don't have an author, this type of orderly reality, that there should be some story that we can understand life by, it really doesn't make any sense. But instead of going back to the pre-modern idea of then what we need to do is recognize we need faith in this God, no, they say no, there is no author. We're going to stick with that. But if there's no author, then life doesn't make sense. And what postmodernism has tried to do is live with the reality that there is no author. It doesn't try to fix the inconsistencies, it just tries to live with them. It tries then to live consistently with the fact that there is no author, that there is no God. And so postmodernism critiqued modernism, and it basically killed it because they recognize, just straight up facts don't exist. You always have to make some sort of interpretation. You always have to assign value to the facts that you're working with. And so they decided then to move on with this. Every observation has value that you have to assign, but then it teaches that we have to interpret that reality through our own mind, our own pre-interpretive commitments, we might say. These ideas that we have in our brain beforehand, we have to take those things, filter it through me, and come to some sort of conclusion. And as Christians, we actually agree with that. We believe that every human does have these pre-commitments. Sinful heart is one of them. We filter everything through our own sinful heart. But when they try to communicate, when they try to critique modernism, they cannot offer any kind of hope-filled solution. Postmodernism then recognized modernism eliminated order, it eliminated morality, it basically eliminated transcendence, but they still tried to hold on to those things. What postmodernism has done is they gave up on meaning. They don't even try to have meaning. Postmodernism embraces the lack of meaning, but it comes at a terrible price. When you lose your author, you lose your meaning. If there's no transcendence that holds everything together, there's no history. There's no connection between me and you. We are all individuals. We are all in a walled-off zone by ourselves, so to speak. I exist alone. There's no connection between any of us because we have no greater thing holding all of us together. When you lose your author, you lose your meaning. The only connections then that I have are the connections that I choose to create. There's no standard by which I can judge anything. There's no standard that I can use to measure truth. And so when I stop and think about it, in a postmodern worldview, what is the only thing I can use to determine what life is all about? What is the only thing I can use to determine what has real value? It's my feelings. That's it. That's all I've got to determine what truth is. Everything is filtered through what I feel about it. There's nothing outside of me that I can use to judge between good and bad. And so true postmodern thinking affects everything. I want you to think about what happens when you try to live in the reality that there is no transcendent reality. When you try to live consistent with the fact that there is no author, there is no creator, there's nothing bigger going on. There's no unseen world. What do you end up with? Well, we're going to do this in two parts. The first thing I want to look at is how this affects the thinking of the world around you. And then I want to see how this has actually probably infected your thinking, my thinking, because I know it has infected mine. I feel confident it has infected a lot of believers, and we don't even realize it. So first, though, we want to look at the world. How does this affect the world around us? Well, it has a huge effect on our style and art. Anything goes. Postmodern art is really interesting because it basically just says there's no reverence for context. You can take something that's some obscure or well-known artifact from history and just sort of plop it down in the middle of nowhere. For instance, looking at the Louvre, the great museum in Paris. What do you have there? Well, you have this there's this glass pyramid as the entrance. There is no respect for any sort of context, no consideration of the meaning. What is a pyramid? A pyramid is a tomb. That's what it is. What is this? Well, you have this glass pyramid. It doesn't consider the context. You have this beautiful architecture from the 1200s. And now you have this glass pyramid as the entrance. It doesn't match. It doesn't go with it. It doesn't have anything, and it doesn't even take into account comfort. This pyramid, from what I hear, is amazingly hot when you walk into it. There's no thought of context, no thought of anything What was the only consideration? The only consideration was the author's personal sense of expression. That's it. That's what happens in art. And you see this everywhere. If you go into art schools today, a postmodern art school, they will not teach you how to draw. They will only teach you how to express yourself. This, I would say, that's not art by my definition. Why? Because my definition of art is if I can do it, it's not art. All right? And I can do that. All right? That's my, maybe not a great definition, but it affects style. I mean, you just take anything and put it together, and if you like it, wear it. If you think it makes you look good, do it. You walk down the street of Seattle and Portland, and you start to see that happening more and more. People are putting together things that you're like, that doesn't go together. But if it makes sense to me, I'm good. Postmodernism affects everything. It takes things that don't belong together and puts them together, but what standard do you use to judge whether it's good or bad? There is no standard. It's just how you feel about it. It affects language. This is probably one of the more tragic ones of these. We assume as Christians that we have a common humanity, that we all are descended from the same person. Because of that, we recognize we can understand each other. I can stand here and say what I'm saying, and sure, there might be some things that get lost, but when I'm talking to you, I expect that you can understand what I'm saying for the most part. But in the postmodern worldview, you do not believe that anyone can ever really understand you. I'm coming from my perspective, you're coming from your perspective, and you may not at all get what I'm saying, and you just take what I'm saying and you use it however you want to use it. I'll take what you're saying and use it how I want to use it, interpret it how I want to interpret it. There is no standard of language. Postmodernism then believes that without the transcendent being, there is no one who knows everything, and therefore there is no account of the human condition. There's no story that makes sense of this world that we live in. We have no idea why we're here, what we're here for, or where we're going. There's no story, no meta-narrative, so to speak, that connects, gives meaning to all of life. And because there's no story, there's no way you can understand somebody else. You're writing your thoughts and experience, I write my thoughts and experience, and there's no one who can really know me. And so when I read somebody else's thoughts or hear somebody else's thoughts, I just take it the way I want to. I allow it to affect me the way I want it to affect me. And you may notice today, in the world that we live in, facts don't seem to matter. You can quote facts, you can quote statistics, and they don't matter. They don't change the argument at all. Why? Because of the way people are processing information. There is a complete breakdown in communication. And what does that lead to? It leads to loneliness. Have you noticed that loneliness in the world is on a rise? The more people are feeling lonely because they don't recognize, they don't believe that there is any possible way that they can have somebody who really understands them. If I'm unable to communicate, how can I have true companionship? And if I don't have true companionship, how can I have any real good, solid relationships? The reality is I can't. This lack of communication then leads to loneliness, and this loneliness leads to depression, and depression will lead to despair. Postmodernism fails to offer hope. It got rid of modernism's idea that you can be neutral, but it had nothing to put in its place, and it all leads to despair. Another thing that this leads to is it affects how you come to know things. In essence, it believes you can't really even know anything about the world. One postmodern author says, everything is absurd. Another said, the world is a bad joke. That's all it is. You're living in this whole farce that doesn't make any sense. You can never really be free. You are always going to come at things from your own presuppositions, from your own interpretive surroundings. Your reasoning can't even be trusted. And so most people in the world today, in America today, 75% responded to a question, is there any kind of absolute truth, with either no or I'm not sure. 75%. Most people don't believe there is any real truth you can count on or stand on. They just don't know. There's doubt then that really anything exists in the minds of a lot of people. There are people that doubt that there is even a physical reality. You would think that one would be easy to prove, but it's not. They say we might just be living in somebody's dream. There's another school of thought that says we're just a jar, a brain in a jar in a laboratory somewhere. That's what the world is. And most interestingly, pushed by Elon Musk, we are starting to see people say that the world is now a video game or a virtual reality experiment by an alien race. That is a real theory of who you are. That is a real theory of your existence right now. And it makes sense in the postmodern mindset. There's doubt then that we are even living in a real physical world. There's doubt about the transcendent realities. There's a doubt that there's even a spiritual realm. There's a doubt about moral reality, that you can ever really determine what's right and wrong. And so the fundamental tenet of postmodern thought is this, that I am the only one who can really choose for me what is right. I'm the only one who can really know what is best for me. And I rely on my feelings to determine this. And it's not at all uncommon to talk to a young person today that holds two entirely opposite views, and they're fine with that because it makes sense to them. You'll notice that as you get to know young people today who have been brought up in this postmodern mindset. It affects authority. This is another area it affects. Because I'm the only one who knows what is right for me, nobody else can tell me what is right for me. No one else can give me direction or guidance in how I should live my life. I should be able to determine for me because I'm the only one who knows what's good for me. I'm the only one I can trust. And so now the interesting thing is young people have always thought that. I mean, that's not anything new. That's not just postmodern thought. But the interesting thing today is that most authorities are starting to agree with that view. Most devastatingly, parents are starting to think not just that it's not a good idea, but it's actually wrong for them to give their children any sort of direction, for them to give their children any kind of guidance as to how they should live. Parents are not doing that. Teachers are not doing that. They're letting kids choose for themselves who they think they are, what they think they should become, and not offering any instruction because they have become convinced that that child is the only one who can pick for them, and it would be wrong for them to enforce their views on their children. This also has a devastating effect on community. Again, if I am the only one who can determine my own happiness, then why would I do anything that doesn't lead to my own happiness? That means you're going to have a real lack of commitment. Because if I don't want to do it, if it doesn't give me personal fulfillment, why would I ever do it? Now think about the devastating effect that has on a community. Think about jobs. Young people today often will not take a job unless it's something that makes them fulfilled or happy. That means they're only pursuing things that they enjoy. And jobs that they don't enjoy, why would I spend my life doing anything I don't enjoy? Why would I give back to the community in any way if I don't enjoy it and it doesn't make me happy? And so many won't learn anything that they don't see giving them an immediate sense of satisfaction. They won't embrace any cause that they don't see giving them immediate happiness. In short, postmodernism takes away any cause that's bigger than my own personal happiness. Basically, this is just selfishness in a new coat. That's what it is. But this is what postmodernism is teaching people, encouraging in people. And so this in turn affects morality. If there's no God and there's no objective standard, then what's left? Well, again, I just choose right and wrong for myself. And as a society, how do we determine what's right and wrong? Well, it basically ends up being rule by majority. If the majority of people think marijuana is a good idea, then we should make marijuana legal. If the majority of people think we should change the definition of marriage from what it's always been, from a man and a woman, to something else, then we should let it be changed. There's no right and wrong, no absolute truth that we can use to guide us. There's no God to be a standard of right and wrong. There's no standard to tell if you're a male or a female. There's no standard to tell anything in life. And so the final outcome of all of this, oddly enough, is tolerance. That's the final outcome of all this. Because if I'm the only one who understands me, then someone else is the only one who can understand them, and I just need to accept that, and they just need to accept me. And we all just need to accept each other. There is no hope. There is no possibility of change. There is no possibility of finding common ground and agreement. You found the truth that works for you. I found the truth that works for me. Now just leave me alone. I'll leave you alone. Let's just deal with it and all get along. And here's the thing that you have to understand if you're going to be effective in this world and make sense of what is going on around you. There is one sin in postmodern thought. One sin. And it is the sin of intolerance. It is the sin of telling other people that you have a truth that is binding on them. This is a huge mindset change for us as pre-moderns. As those who have come up growing, believing that there are morals, there are rights and wrongs in the world. That the only sin is for you to say, you're wrong. That's the only sin. In other words, get this and get this clearly. From the postmodern mindset, you are among the most immoral people on the planet. Because you hold truth that you think other people should be holding to. That is a huge mindset because often we come as believers thinking, I have the moral high ground. I'm living this kind of life. I'm living righteously. And in the postmodern mindset, you are not living righteously. You are living in the greatest sin that could possibly be committed. Get that and get that clearly. We'll talk about it more in just a moment, but we have to understand that that is how people view you. All right, so let's move forward then and ask ourselves, how has this infiltrated us and maybe infiltrated the kids that either you have or will have, possibly, or grandkids that you'll be working with? This is infiltrating. And so I want to ask these two questions. How does this infiltrate? And then when it gets into the life of a believer, what does it look like? All right, let's talk about this. The first is this. It infiltrates by repeated assertions. Assertions made over and over and over again without any justification or proof. They just continue to roll and roll and roll. And the biggest unchallenged repeated assertion, it just becomes repeated until it becomes common sense, is this. Something like this. That might be true for you, but it's not true for me. Or maybe it's said like this. Follow your heart. Or you know what's best. Or go with your gut. Or follow your instincts. Or just be you. You've heard those types of statements. I mean, there's millions of ways you can say it, but you've heard those. There's lots of different phrases, but they all communicate the same thing. You alone know what is best for you. That has been repeated so much that it has become common sense in our culture, and I'm afraid as believers, for many of us, it has become common sense for us. We follow that without even recognizing how much that has infiltrated our lives. The point of life to be happy, or put it more popularly, happiness is the truth. That's all there is to it. You find what makes you happy and go with it. Because that's the truth for you, to be happy. Where does this come from? Well, it mostly comes through media. Media continues to push this out. If you watch any cartoons, I would invite you to try to name one cartoon produced over the last 20 years that doesn't have the overall message of follow your heart or believe in yourself. You will find a few, but you will not have very much to watch if that's what you're looking for. Because the reality is this has been pushed and pushed and pushed in so many movies. You see that the kid is the one who has a great idea. The kid is the one who understands reality. They rebel against the system, and at the end of the movie, the adult ends up apologizing to the kid because the adult was insensitive and intolerant, and the kid was right, and the kid is the hero. This is the plot line of so many movies that we watch. And alert parents are going to obviously say, we're not going to watch this movie because of this kind of wrong sexual content or this kind of wrong language, but often we miss the worldview behind it. That this movie is teaching your kids to trust themselves and to follow their heart. And I think that is much more dangerous than even the words or the other content. Because the Bible gives us a very different picture than follow your heart and trust your heart. The Bible says you have a self that desperately needs to be controlled. And one of the fruits of the Spirit is that your self is controlled. You have Jeremiah 17:9 saying that our heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. Isaiah says we've all gone our own way and we need to be rescued. In Romans we read that our heart is desperately wicked. And in Psalms we see that there is an outside truth that guides our path, that is a light to our feet. And yet everything in our culture tells us, look inside of you, because that's where truth is found. Now I want to ask, what does this look like in us as Christians? Where can we fall for this? The first is this: we might love disorder and chaos more than order. In our life, in our style, in our art, in our music, instead of imitating the orderly Creator who made us and instructs us, we choose to try to find order and meaning and fulfillment in chaos, in randomness. The assumption is in our minds that if I like it, it must be good for me. That truth comes from inside of me and I can choose what's comfortable and good for me. I can decide what is right and wrong for me. We may have adopted the postmodern view of language. You've basically concluded that the Bible is not able to be understood by you. Maybe Pastor Schrader can do it. He gets it. He understands it. I'll listen to him. He'll explain it to me, but this is just too much for me. I can't get it. I don't have the tools to be able to do it. This is too hard. There's no way I can understand the language of the biblical authors. Maybe you've lost confidence in the biblical story. You're not really all that sure that your beliefs are better than somebody else's beliefs. You're not sure that you can push your view and your way of thinking on somebody else, so you stop trying. Maybe you've just lost confidence in it. It can undermine how we view authority. Christian young people rarely show much more respect for authority than the secular young people do. Most, in cases, parents are tragically trying to be their kids' friends instead of recognizing, I'm my kid's authority. I'm the one God has given to instruct and direct them. But the Bible is really clear about this. Kids are foolish by nature. That's the reality. They need instruction. They need someone to come alongside and tell them, don't trust your instinct. Here's the truth. Here's reality. God has given you a job to do in your kid's life, and it is to be their authority, and God has given kids the job of obeying and honoring. And yet parents want to give kids choices today. I was so sad to see a friend. I talked to him, and he literally told me, I can't tell my kid what's right and wrong. I can't tell him what he needs to do. He needs to find out for himself. This is what is happening. We can't let it happen in us. We can start to believe that morality doesn't matter. I read a survey that was just shocking to me, that the majority of young people that call themselves Christian think that their sexual conduct has no consequences. That it's just a decision that's their own decision to make, and God just has to be fine with it. This is happening. This is happening to people who say that they are followers of Christ. And yet what I do doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter. And as Christians, our biggest temptation is to believe the line about tolerance. That all we have to do is tolerate, because actually tolerance is more important than truth. Because we can disguise this in biblical language, can't we? We can talk about love, and by love we simply mean tolerate. Tolerance certainly has a place in the Christian life, don't get me wrong, but God has called us to bear with one another and to celebrate differences. But it does not tell us to tolerate sin. God does not say it doesn't matter how you live or what you do. There is no contradiction between biblical truth and love. No contradiction at all. Look at the life of Jesus. He made a lot of people uncomfortable with his teaching. to the point that he was hunted down like a criminal and killed. The apostles made people so uncomfortable that they were tortured for their faith. Many of them were killed because truth will make people uncomfortable, especially in a postmodern context. But truth needs to trump comfort. But we congratulate ourselves, don't we? The world really thinks I'm a good person. They don't seem to mind at all that I'm a Christian. They like the way that I'm friendly and nice and kind to them, and I don't ever make them uncomfortable. Look how great I'm doing at this Christian thing. I have learned to make people happy. I must be doing it right. But if you read the Bible and let that be your guide, you will realize very quickly that you might be doing things wrong. Because realistically, we have watered down our truth so much and shut our mouths so tightly. The reality is we're not showing any kind of faith at all in the world we live in. You see, what God has called us to do is be drastically different. And what the postmodern world has done is it has created this whole zone that they have come to believe and tried to get us to believe that is neutral. They've tried to make us think your faith belongs out here somewhere, but when you enter this zone, this is the neutral zone, and we all act in a neutral way. And if we're all acting neutral, then everybody's going to be happy. The reality is there is no neutral zone. You are always in a war. You cannot walk into the neutral zone because there is no neutral zone. It's a zone that says God doesn't exist. And you can't walk in and say, I'm going to pretend like I fit in well and I'm happy over here in this zone. No, God exists. He's the most important reality in your life. He is who you are. He is your identity. You bring that in wherever you go, and that is going to make the neutral zone, so to speak, very uncomfortable. We can't just sit around and tolerate. And so a few conclusions as we close today. If this is where we are as a culture, what can we do about this? It's very clear that the church is being influenced by postmodernism more than I think the Christian faith is impacting the postmodern world. And I think that's a shame. Because postmodernism, get this, offers nothing. It offers nothing. No hope, no solution, no meaning, nothing. It's empty. Why do you want that as a believer? Why do you want to act like this is important and helpful and good? By abandoning all meaning and by pursuing self-interest, you miss out on all the joy that the Christian life offers. There's nothing left. Second thing, as Christians, we have to learn to present truth to a postmodern world. We have to start by recognizing that you have the truth. That's what we'll be talking about in the next lesson. But faith, you have a starting point. You have a foundation. You know that there's an orderly physical reality. You know that there's an orderly moral reality. You know there's an orderly transcendent reality. And the most important thing is being right with that orderly reality. And give that truth to the postmodern world. But the biggest thing I think we can do is have hope. I was just driving by, Naomi was just driving by a man yesterday, holding up a sign, panhandler type of guy, and his sign said, "Losing hope." There's so many people like that right now. So many people who have lost their homes in a fire right now. So many people looking at the smoke and saying, what's going to happen next? We've got the pandemic, we've got the election season, we've got all of this going on, we've got all this division, we've got all these riots, we've got all this, everything's going wrong, the world's going crazy. How do we even have hope in this situation? You have hope. You have an answer. And you have a great reason to hope. You have a glorious future awaiting you. You have learned that this world is not all there is. There's something much bigger and brighter and better coming for you. You have hope. But it's very possible that we get so attracted to this world that we start thinking, this really stinks. And as you read about postmodernism, you say, that's what people are thinking? This is terrible. No. You have hope. Don't despair. Don't get discouraged about what's going on around you. Yes, it's hard, but this is an opportunity. You have faith. You have something the postmodern world desperately needs to see. You can have hope. And the important thing is to learn how they're thinking. Learn what they think is truth. And communicate clearly the hope that you have and the reason for it. Postmoderns are looking for relationships. They don't believe they have community. You can be a friend. They're looking for that. And you can teach the message of biblical purpose. There is a reason that we are here. Without faith, life doesn't make much sense. It makes about as much sense as a book without an author. And yet that's what God has called you in this time period of life to be. A person who believes that there is an author and communicates that to those who don't. But we need to understand what we're up against, and next we're going to look at what we have. Because we have a great, great reason for life that makes a lot of sense. We'll look forward to exploring that next. Let's close in prayer. Father, thank you for your word, for the power that it has. Thank you that because of it, we have hope that the world around us doesn't have. Help us, Father, I pray, to be bold representatives for you, that Jesus Christ would be magnified, glorified, and exalted by us being hopeful believers in the world that lacks hope. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.